what actually causes avoidant attachment style. But I want to make it super clear that understanding what causes avoidant attachment style is part of the way out of it, okay? Understanding the cause of avoidant attachment style is part of the way out of it. We have to have a very robust understanding of these parts of ourselves and of our lives. So here's a couple things. Here's some of the main buckets. And maybe just before I go on, a lot of the work around attachment style, if you're familiar with any of this work, you've maybe read a book called Attached. You've maybe heard of a lot of the work that Dr. John Bowlby has done or Mary Ainsworth. Those are very common. I pull from that, but I also pull from my good friend, colleague, and mentor, Mr. Dewey Freeman, who unless you've tuned in my show, you may not have ever heard of before. He's been doing attachment work and developmental psychology for 40 plus years. He's trained thousands of therapists, and he's created his own developmental and attachment-based model, which I think is very simple and profound, and I will be sharing that in a future video. But there's a couple causalities that I want to talk about here. Number one is emotional distance from a caregiver. Emotional distance from a caregiver. And so Dr. John Bowlby actually observed that caregivers who are emotionally distant from their children or sort of unresponsive to their children's needs can lead to the development of an avoidant attachment style. So you can imagine being a kid and you are crying or you're upset about something and your parent is largely non-responsive. They are not really responsive or caretaking of your emotional upsetness, of your distress. And as a child, that can feel a whole bunch of ways. But what it teaches that child is essentially my emotions, my emotional experience doesn't matter to the people that are around me. My emotional experience doesn't matter to the people around me, or it's not safe for me to trust my emotional experience with the people around me. So in these cases, the child learns that showing any type of vulnerability, seeking any kind of comfort during hardship, right? So just note some of these things as I'm going through, because if this is like pinging with you, these are parts of the things that are going to help you get the hell out of this avoidant territory. So seeking comfort in another person when we're going through hardship will not elicit a supportive response from the caregiver, from the other person that we are in relationship. So that's a really big piece. This emotional distance can be a really big piece. And I'm going to insert my good friend Dewey Freeman, his definition of what makes a secure attachment. It's a super simple thing. It's been a massive game changer for me to understand. And I think it's going to help you change the way that you engage in your relationship. So it's super simple. Here it is. Attachment, secure, healthy attachment is dependent on our ability to go through a hard time and come out the other side okay. So secure, healthy attachment is dependent on our ability to go through a hard time with another person, right? To stay in relationship, to probably communicate with them, and to come out the other side okay. So a hard time can be, you as a kid being bullied at school and talking to your parents about it and getting real support. It can be, you having just crying as a kid because you're upset or you hurt yourself and getting support for it. That's going through the hard time with that other person. You're telling them, hey, or you're, displaying in some fashion, I'm going through a hard time. And that other person is going through the hard time with you and you come out the other side okay. Now, this is important because how this shows up in your current day relationships is going through a hard time is usually revolves around some type of conflict, disconnection with your partner, or it can be something that's happening outside of the relationship, right? Maybe one of your parents is ill or sick. Maybe you're going through some type of struggle at work, or there's a challenge in your business or with one of your friends. And you can bring those things to your partner and you can, or any relationship, and you can go through that with them. You can go through that hard time and come out the other side okay. What starts to break down this secure attachment, this healthy attachment, is when we have the perspective of, I can't go through a hard time with you and come out the other side okay. So you hear this and see this in a lot of marriages and relationships where the individuals have these reoccurring arguments and conflicts that they don't feel like they ever move through. And so because of that, it's like, no, I don't trust you to go through I can't trust you to go through a hard time with me. We never come out the other side okay. And it breaks down and erodes the attachment between the two people. So again, secure attachment is two people's ability to go through a hard time and come out the other side okay in relationship, with contact, with intimacy, with openness. So back to emotional distance from caregivers. This is one of the main causes of avoidant attachment. And it can look one or two other ways. Emotional distance from the caregiver can also be high levels of control from that caretaker, high levels of manipulation from the caretaker. And, maybe they were constantly controlling you, what you did, what you could say, what you could wear. They were constantly manipulating you or, sort of gaslighting you as you were growing up and, telling you that something wasn't true when you knew that it was, or something didn't happen when you knew that it was. An example of this is, I've worked with a number of men who caught a parent having an affair and the parent lied about it and said, no, that's not happening. That type of it's an extreme version, but that type of betrayal and then gaslighting can create a big rift in the attachment to the degree where you feel like you can't trust relationship. And so you start to pull away. So a last example, and this is for, when we're very young, is when you are a child and you start to cry or show distress, but you are ignored for whatever reason. Doesn't matter what the reason is, right? Because again, you're a child. You don't have, your prefrontal cortex isn't online. You're not reasoning through things like, oh, I can see that mom's super busy with my brother and sister. That's not happening. It's just, I'm distressed. I need something. I'm hungry. I need a diaper change. I need to be held because I'm feeling scared or whatever it is. If you are ignored or told to be quiet enough times by your caregiver, by mom, dad, whoever your caregiver is, the likelihood of you learning to suppress your emotional needs is very, very high. So you start to avoid seeking comfort. So a big asterisk that I want to put to this is, if you are someone who experienced emotional distance as a child or emotional shutdown, you were told to be quiet, you're told to stop crying, you're told, all those types of things, it's very likely that you will continue that in your relationships. You will continue to emotionally distance from your partner. You won't trust that you can bring your emotional needs. You won't trust that you can seek any type of comfort from your partner. And so you will leave all of those things out of the relationship. Now, that's a really big indicator of how to actually resolve this avoidant attachment style and to start to move towards a secure attachment style, which we're going to talk about more later. But what I want to drop here is just the note that if this is something that you experienced quite a bit of, right? Mom was shut down, dad was shut down, it wasn't safe for you to talk about what you were experiencing emotionally or express what you needed in any way, shape, or form. You'd ask for something that you wanted and you'd get yelled at, or, you'd go and try and seek some comfort when you were upset and you would get rejected or, told to shut up or told to go to your room. All of that is going to inform that you are going to have to risk starting to bring some of your emotional needs into your relationship, because my guess is that they do not have a place. Usually the story here is my experience doesn't matter. I'm going to touch more on that later. Next, number 2 is the encouragement to be prematurely independent, or situations that sort of thrust you as a kid into premature independence. So sometimes caregivers will encourage their children to be excessively independent at a very, very young age, asking them to contribute around the household, asking them to take on adult-like tasks, which can cause that child to be put into a more adult orientation long before they are able to. And so the secure attachment with the caregiver, with the adult, doesn't actually have time to form or set and you're being asked to take on something much bigger than you. The analogy that I like here is, imagine pouring the foundation of a house and the concrete hasn't actually set yet, and you're starting to try and build the frame on top of that. It's going to create all types of challenges as you continue to build the rest of the home. So an example of this is, a caregiver who sort of pushes their child at a very young age to do a lot of tasks alone, right? If you're like 6 years old and your parents are getting you to do the laundry or helping them balance their checkbook, or, like you're 6 years old and they're getting you to try and understand monetary policy, like that kind of stuff is just going to be too hard. Things that were outside that you're not developmentally ready for can also be a big one. So trying to take on responsibility around the house, right? If you grew up in a single parent household and you had to take on the responsibility, for good or for worse, of tending to another child, of being a disciplinarian for one of your siblings, having to care for other kids like that, having to care maybe for a sick parent, etc. Those can be a big cause to the avoidant attachment style, because again, like I said, it doesn't allow for us to develop a very secure attachment with a caregiver. And what starts to happen within that child's brain is other people's needs matter more than mine. Other people's needs matter more than mine. And so I have to prioritize other people's needs above mine. And this can create a very real sense of hostility within us, so that when we get older, it's like, F that, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to prioritize your needs. I'm not going to prioritize what you want or what you need. And anytime that you tell me what you want or need, I'm going to shut down. I'm going to pull away, especially if it's closeness, right? Especially if what you need is for me to be emotionally close to you, because then that feels like I'm going to have to take care of you. Next is rejection of attachment needs. Rejection of attachment needs. So if a caregiver, if one of your parents consistently rejects or punishes you as a child when you attempt to seek comfort or support, right? You had a nightmare, you're getting bullied at school, you hurt yourself physically, and you get rejected or yelled at, you get punished or rejected when you're trying to get that support. What can happen to you as a kid is that you adapt by developing the avoidant attachment style, because you learn that it's not okay for me to ask for support. It's not okay for me to make my needs known. And so how I have to adapt and survive, right? Again, avoidant attachment styles and anxious attachment styles, they are adaptive strategies. So if I keep asking you as my parent for support, for help, and you reject it and you punish me for that, what it teaches me is that what I need and want ultimately need to stay out of our relationship. Okay. And again, this is the big piece of avoidant attachments, is that we believe, and I was an avoidant attachment style, we believe that our needs, our wants, our fundamental core desires within a relationship don't really matter. And so we start to withhold them because we believe, what's the point? And so there's sort of this learned helplessness that can show up within an avoidant. There's a learned helplessness that can sometimes show up in an avoidant that says, it doesn't matter what I want or need. I can't bring, my needs or wants or my desires forward, because that would cause some type of conflict in the relationship. So again, an example of this is, a child reaching out for a hug when they are feeling sad, or when they're feeling lonely, or when they hurt themselves, and them being pushed away or scolded, leading them to stop seeking physical affection. That's an example, right? Or you might bring a problem to a parent, something that's happening at school or with one of your siblings, and what you're looking for is support and reassurance that what you're feeling is okay. And instead what you get is, I don't have time to deal with this right now, or this isn't a big deal. I don't understand why you're making a big deal of this, or like, just get over it. Or even worse, you get punished for bringing that to your parents, right? What the hell's wrong with you? Like, this is stupid. Why do you think that this is an issue? That's going to reinforce internally, when I'm going through something challenging, it doesn't matter to other people. So I should just offload it. Lastly, one of the last main causes I'm going to talk about today is consistency or predictability of intimacy and connection. Predictability and consistency of connection or intimacy. So when we are young, when you are developing very early on in life, what you need more than anything else is just consistency and predictability. When you're an infant, especially, how you develop a sense of safety and trust in other people and in the world is through repeatedly crying, through repeatedly trying to express your needs, even though it might be, pre-verbal. You might not actually be saying, I'm hungry, I want to eat, or, I need to take a piss or anything like that. It's just pre-verbal. And having those needs be consistently met. Having closeness, having physical touch and physical connection, having emotional connection, being consistently and predictably met. One of the biggest harms is inconsistent responses from caregivers or inconsistent emotional stability. So if a caregiver is sometimes nurturing, but sometimes incredibly cold and disconnected, almost in like this bipolar way, where you don't know if you're going to get this loving, kind, nurturing person, or you're going to get this completely shut down, shut off individual, or on the other side of the spectrum, you don't know if you're going to get this loving, kind person or this person who's like this monster who's yelling at you and screaming or calling you names or being verbally, emotionally, or physically abusive. That type of inconsistency is going to cause the response of, I can't trust you to be consistently relational. And again, this doesn't mean that parents or caregivers aren't allowed to have some type of volatility, right? I'm not saying that a parent getting upset or being disconnected sometimes isn't acceptable. That's totally normal. What I'm talking about is that the consistency that happens with your parent is that you can consistently expect them to be inconsistent. You can consistently expect them to be inconsistent. So what you experienced growing up was, I just never knew what I was going to get. I never knew what to expect. Sometimes I'd say a joke and they'd laugh, and sometimes I'd say a joke and they'd like lose their shit. And so that type of inconsistency causes a mistrust in relationship, in connection, in intimacy, and it causes a mistrust in the other person's ability to take care of themselves. And so again, the avoidant attachment style starts to develop because we have this confusion as kids that starts to develop a lack of trust in the caregiver, which sort of fosters that avoidant attachment style, right? Because it's like, I can't trust you to be consistent. And so it's easier for me, again, protective strategy, it's easier for me to pull in the nets and disconnect from you because I don't know what I'm going to get. And so if I'm disconnected from you, at least I know what I'm going to get then, right? Because our brain is a pattern recognition machine. Our nervous system is connected to that, and it wants to know, can you be predictable? So again, a big part, I'm just going to drop this hint in, a big part of creating a secure attachment, a healthy attachment style, is predictability. It's consistency in staying in connection, staying in intimacy, leaning into the discomfort of a conversation when you're wanting to shut down, when you're wanting to pull away, when you're wanting to blame the other person. It's consistency and predictability in staying connected and staying in the we dynamic of the relationship instead of pulling away entirely, which what ends up happening for a lot of avoidant attachment styles. A lot of avoidant attachment styles, especially the ones who experience the consistency, the lack of consistency and predictability, are the same ones who might develop some connection and some closeness, and then they'll do something to pull away. And so we repeat that pattern again.